Hi, welcome to the Bell Performance video blog. I'm Eric Bjornstad with Bell Performance. Today we're going to talk about the legacy of William Clay Ford. William Clay Ford was the grandson of Henry Ford, who passed away March 9th. Sports fans may know him as the longtime owner of the NFL's Detroit Lions, but William Clay Ford actually left some pretty big marks on the U.S. auto industry. Maybe not as big as his grandfather, Henry Ford, but he was still extremely influential. And if you look at his story, it makes for some pretty interesting stuff. He joined Ford, the Ford board of directors, pretty much out of college. He was in college in Yale. And when he got there, what he wanted to do, this was in the 50s. What he wanted to do was he wanted to make a luxury car for Ford that would be able to go up against the things like the Chevy Impala, the Rolls Royce, and so what he did is he took the old Continental division, which had been around for in the 30s and 40s, but he took it and he set about making this car called the Mark II. Now, if you look back in history, the Mark II, they only made a few model years of the Mark II, and in fact, Continental eventually, as a car division, was merged with Lincoln after less than a year and a half. But the Mark II itself set such standards for quality and for emphasis on customer satisfaction that it really left a lasting legacy in the Ford Motor Company for years to come. So let's think about the Mark II. Okay, what were the hallmarks of the Mark II? Well, what they wanted to do when they were designing it was they wanted to make a car that was big and fast, but yet looked like nothing else out there on the road at that time. There were a lot of the cars were starting to incorporate a lot of chrome. The Mark II moved away from that and really tried to incorporate more European body styling. If you look at how it was made, it's really remarkable the quality standards that William Clay Ford applied to making this really luxury, premium, top-of-the-line car model. Okay, so think about it. It had leather upholstery that was sourced from Scotland. It was hand built. Each one, this is the starting point. Each car was hand built. Each car had 4 coats of lacquer paint, all of them hand sanded and finished. In fact, just the painting was such a laborious process for the Mark II that Ford could actually build entire cars, other car models. They could build one of those from start to finish in less time than it took to paint and finish one Mark II car. They would test the engine and the transmission, dyno tested both before and after installation. The things like the sheet metal, they would test fit the sheet metal before painting so that the designers could make sure that all the gaps in the car were uniform to such tight tolerances like 25 1/1000ths of an inch. You could not have any gaps that were greater than 25 1/1000ths of an inch, and in order to do that they had to basically test fit all of the parts. Talking about the parts, the quality of the parts, they would reject entire batches of parts just because they didn't look right. Now, you might think, well, that's kind of stupid, but what we mean by didn't look right is, they'd get a batch of, I don't know, bumpers or something. And the quality engineers would inspect the parts and they would say, well, these parts don't look like they're going to last as long as some of the others, so we've got to send these back. How many car companies today would do something like that? I really can't think of any. Maybe Tesla would, but that's what Ford did with the Mark II. They had a quality committee that oversaw every single aspect of production of the Mark II. They would pull cars off the line at random and personally test extensively and personally test each car. They would contact customers individually. They would send people out to customers who had purchased them to personally make sure, based on a one-on-one relationship, that those people were satisfied with their cars. And everybody who was involved in the production process for the Mark II was responsible. They took it upon themselves to feel responsible for ensuring that the highest quality product was turned out by Ford. So you would get things like you could pull a car off the line at any time if there was a defect. In fact, there's a story that a security guard once stopped an entire shipment of Mark IIs, a whole shipment of them, from leaving the facility because he noticed that one of the cars had a paint defect. So he stopped the whole shipment, they pulled it off, they corrected it, made sure that everything was top of the line for the Mark II. So you talk about the best materials, the best craftsmanship, the best engineering, and the best customer service. That is the legacy that William Clay Ford wanted to establish with the Mark II, and it worked. When it rolled out, people looked at it and said, "Wow, we have never seen anything like this before." It became the car that the best of the best wanted to own. I mean, you talk about the number of movie stars that had it. There's a story, Elvis had one. There's a story that Warner Brothers bought a Mark II for Elizabeth Taylor as a present, and they had it painted specifically to match her eye color. So the Mark II was synonymous at the time with the best of the best. Now, if you want the best of the best, then you do have to pay a premium for that. And, the Mark II was no different in that respect. A Mark II model would cost you about $10,000, which in today's money, that's about $85,000. Now, coincidentally, that is how much a Tesla Model S costs. Both of them are the best of the best in terms of quality. Now, despite Ford pricing this at $10,000, they actually lost about $1,000 on every model. So they lost money on every model, Mark II that was sold. Now, for a while, they took it as not as a loss leader, but they absorbed that loss because they said, it is bringing us so much publicity, and it makes the rest of our line look good, and it's worth losing $1,000, losing 10% on every car. However, eventually, what happened was Ford went public. This was around, I think, 1956. Somebody else, I'm sure, can correct me on the exact date, but it was around that time Ford went public, and it was because William Ford, we might call him Bill Ford. So Bill Ford's brother, Henry II, wanted to take the Ford company public, possibly because he needed money. He was kind of renowned for, he liked to spend some money. And so he struck up a deal where Ford would go public, and it would raise a lot of money, and then he'd be able to have as much money as he wanted to spend. Now, unfortunately, the deal he had the Ford family only retaining 25% ownership. Now, William Clay Ford, Bill Ford, said absolutely not, and he was pushing for, we got to own at least 40% of the company, and he put his foot down. He said, I'm not signing off on this, and without his signature, they couldn't go forward with the deal. Now, if he had not relented, this is another aspect of his legacy. If he had compromised, it's entirely possible that Ford Motor Company, as we know it today, would not exist. But he put his foot down. They retained 40% ownership. An unfortunate consequence of this was the shareholders started looking at things, and they said, you're spending an awful lot of money on this Mark II. We don't want you to do that. And so they essentially moved away from that high standard of quality. So, talking about William Clay Ford's legacy, he saved Ford Motor Company in that respect, and he was able to lay down a legacy and emphasis on quality and the best craftsmanship and customer service that really lasted at Ford for a number of decades. Now, all good things do come to an end, and Ford Motor Company eventually started moving away from that, and that's probably one of the reasons why in the 80s and the 90s they kind of lost their way. But it wasn't because Bill Ford, Bill Ford ceased being the chairman of the board at Ford. I'm not sure what year, but it was a good while before Ford Motor Company kind of lost its way. And so with his passing, we can look back on his life and we can say, he really was an influential, a giant of one of the great industries that the United States is known for, the American automotive industry. So we'll say rest in peace, William Clay Ford, and we thank you for leaving us the legacy of the Mark II. So anyway, that's all we have for today. Thanks for joining me. If you like this, go to bellperformance.com or wefixfuel.com. We've got lots of great information there. So just check it out. Again, thanks for joining me. I'm Eric Bjornstad with Bell Performance. See you next time. Bye-bye.